Hiber-Nation 17. Grizzly's Growls presents Stories from the Hiber-Nation. A handy guide for beggars, especially those of the poetic fraternity, by Vachel Lindsay. Part 2. A Mendicant Pilgrimage in the East. A Temple Made with Hands. Part 3. The Sermon on the Mount. Well, I loved all men that night, even the fellow in the melodramatic laboring man costume, who appeared after 2 hours to drive us animals upstairs into one corner of the chapel, where a dozen of our kind had already assembled from somewhere. Now, on the far side of that chapel sat the money-fed. The aisle was a great gulf between them and us. I smiled across the gulf indulgently, imagining by what exhortations to come and help us in our problem those uncomfortable persons had been assembled. An unmitigated clergyman rose to read a text. I presume this clergyman imagined Christ wore a white tie and was on a salary promptly paid by some of our oldest families. But I share with the followers of St. Francis the vision of Christ as a man of the open road, improvident as a sparrow. I share with the followers of Tolstoy the opinion that when Christ proclaimed those uncomfortable social doctrines, he meant what he said. The clergyman read, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." He read much more than I will quote. Here is the final passage. "Ye have heard how it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, well, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and to him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away." Well, this Pharisee smugly assumed that he was authorized by the deity to explain away this scripture, and he did it, as a reader has heard it done many a time. The Pharisee was followed by a fat scribe who tried to smile away what the other fellow had tried to argue away. The fat one then called on the assembly to bow and exhorted the repentant to hold up their hands to be prayed for. I held up my hand. Was I not eating the bread of the mission? And then I felt like a sinner anyway. "Thank God," said the fat one. After a hymn, the testimonies were called for. I felt the Spirit moved me, but someone had the floor. Across the gulf she stood, an exceedingly well-dressed and blindly devout sister. She glanced with terrified shrinking at the animals she hoped to benefit. She said, "There has been one great difficulty in my Christian life. It came with seeking for the Spirit. Sometimes we think it has come with power when we are simply stirred by our own selfish desires. Our works will show whether we are moved by the Spirit." I wanted to preach to them a sermon on St. Francis, but how could I? There was still a quarter in my pocket. Meanwhile, there arose a saint with a pompadour and blocky jaws. He was distinctly inferior in social position to a great part of the saints. It was probable he had given that testimony many times, but he did not want the meeting to drag. He spake in a loud voice, "I was saved from a drunkard's life in this mission 18 years ago, and ever since, not by my own power, but by the grace of God, I have been leading a God-fearing and money-making life in this town." That was his exact phrase, a money-making life. His intention was good, but he should have been more tactful. The Pharisee looked annoyed. Part 4. A Screaming Farce. Now, while I advise all self-respecting citizens to skip this section, it is nothing but overstrained, shabby farce. The throng melted. Scribe and Pharisee, Davis and Mrs. Davis, and their satellites went home to their comfortable beds. Many of the roughs on our side of the house found somewhere else to stay. The fellow dressed like a working man in a melodrama sought the consolations of his own home. Had the last authority departed? Were we to have anarchy? The frog, in his gentlest manner, sidled up to make friends again. "Now you can have your nice warm bath, you two." I looked around. There were two of us then. Beside me, fresh from a boxcar, was a battered scalawag. The frog must have let him in at the last moment. We three climbed to the bathroom. "Wait a minute," said the amphibian. He disappeared. I opened my eyes, for this creature spoke with the voice of authority. The boxcar scalawag grinned sheepishly. There was a scuffling overhead, a scratch and a rumble. We two looked up just in time to dodge the astonishing vision of a clothes horse descending through a trapdoor by a rope. At the upper end of the rope was the absurd bald head of our newly achieved superintendent. "Hello, Santa Claus," said the boxcar tramp. "Whose Christmas present is this?" The frog shouted, "You put your shoes and hats in the corner. If you have any tobacco, put it in your shoes. Hang everything else on the clothes horse." I obeyed, except that I had no tobacco. The rascal by my side had a plenty, and sawdusted the bathroom floor with some of it, and the remainder went into his footgear. Then we two, companions in nakedness, watched the frog haul our clothes out of sight. He closed the trapdoor with many grunts. Then this amphibian, this boss, descended and entered the bathroom. He was a dry land amphibian. He had never taken a bath himself, but was there to superintend. He seemed to feel himself the accredited representative of all the good people behind the mission. And no doubt he was. Can it be possible, I asked myself, that they have chosen this creature to apply their Christianity? The frog said to my companion, "Get in the tub." Well, then he turned on the water, regulated the temperature, and watched as though he expected one of us to steal the faucets from the wash bowl. He threw a gruesome rag at the tramp and allowed him to scrub himself. The creature, bathing, seemed well disposed toward the idea, and had put soap on about 1/3 of his person, when the frog shouted, "Well, I've got to get up at 4:30. Well, the scalawag took the hint and rose like Venus from the foam. He splashed off part of it, rubbed off the rest with a towel that was the fallen sister of the wash rag. Now, the frog was evidently trying to enforce, in a literal way, regulations he did not understand. He wiped out the bathtub most carefully with the unclean wash rag. Then he provided the scalawag with a shirt for nightwear. The creature put it on and said, "Hey, not a peach." He was. The nightie was old, heavily starched, dress shirt, maybe once white, and maybe it had once been worn by the scribe or the Pharisee, but it had not been washed since. The rascal cut quite a figure as he took long steps down the corridor to bed, piloted by the hurrying amphibian. He was a long-legged rascal, and the slivered remainders of that ancient shirt flapped about him gloriously. I was hustled into the tub after the rascal. I was supervised in the same manner. "Now wash," boomed the amphibian. He threw at me the sloppy rag of my predecessor. I threw it promptly on the floor. "I don't use a wash rag," I said. "Hurry," croaked the frog. And he let the water out of the tub, and he handed me the towel the scalawag had used. I had not, as a matter of fact, had a bath, and I was quite footsore. "I don't want that towel," I said. "Well, you're awful fancy, aren't you?" sneered the frog. Wherever I was damp, I rubbed myself dry with my bare hands, being skilled in the matter, meanwhile reflecting that there is nothing worse than a Pharisee, except a creature like this. I wonder if it was too late to rouse a mob among the better element of the town, neither saints nor sinners, but just plain malefactors of great wealth, and have this person lynched. There were probably multi-millionaires in this town giving $10 bills to this mission who were imagining they were giving a free bath to somebody. I wanted to appeal to some man with manicured hands who had grown decently rich robbing the widow and the orphan, and who now had the leisure to surround himself with the appurtenances of civility and the manners of a Chesterfield. I am through with the poor but honest submerged tenth. Rich worldlings for mine, I muttered. Put these on, squeaked the frog. His manner said, See how good we are to you. He held out the treasure of the establishment, a night garment retained for fastidious new arrivals, newly bathed. Of course, no one else was supposed to bathe. Was the garment he held out a slivered shirt? Nay, it was a sort of pajama combination. Hundreds of men had found shelter, taken a luxurious bath, and put these on. They were companions in crime of the towel and the wash-rag. Let us suppose the 365 men wore them a year. In 10 years there would have been about 3,650 bathed men in them. That did not account for their appearance. What makes them so dirty? I asked. No answer. Can I wear my underclothes to bed instead of these? No. Why? Sulfur. What do you mean sulfur? Well, your clothes are upstairs being fumigated. Well, can I get my socks tonight? I always wash them before I go to bed. No, it's against the law of the state, and you would just dirty up those bowls. I have scrubbed them out. I'll wash them out afterward. I haven't time to wait. I must get up at 4:30. But why fumigate my clean underwear and give me dirty pajamas? The frog was getting flabbergasted. I tell you, it's the law of New Jersey. You are getting awful fancy. If I had had my way, you never would have been let in here. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, I said to myself, and put on the pajamas. This insanitary director showed me to my bed. It was in a long, low room with all the windows closed, where half a score were asleep. The sheets had never been washed. Why was it that in a mission so shining in its reading room, so devout in its chapels, so melodramatic with its clean working man boss in the daytime, that these things were so? The lights went out. I kicked off the pajamas and slept. I awoke at midnight and reflected on these matters. And I quoted another scripture to myself. I was naked, and you clothed me. Part 5. The Highway of Our God. At 6 o'clock I was called for breakfast. My sulphur-smelling clothes were on my bed. I put them on with a light heart, for after all I had slept well. My feet were not stiff. The quarter was still in my trouser pocket. I presume that hoodoo quarter had something to do with a bad breakfast. The amphibian was now cook. He gave each man a soup plate heaped with oatmeal. If it had been oats, it would have been food for so many horses. Had the frog been up since 4:30 preparing this? Now, the price of that horse feed might have gone into something to eat. There was a salty blue sauce on it that was called milk, and there was dry bread to be had without butter, and as much bad coffee as a man could drink. A person called the bookkeeper arrived with the janitor. I made my formal farewells to those representatives of the law, before whom the amphibian melted with humility. The scalawag who had bathed with me tipped me a wink and tried to escape in my company, but I bade him good-bye so firmly that the authorities noticed, and the brash creature remained glued to his chair. He probably had to do his full share of kindling before he escaped. I went forth from that place into the highway of our God, who dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all men life and breath and all things. I said in my heart, I shall walk on and find a better, far holier shrine than this at the ends of the infinite earth. Thanks for listening to Stories from the Hiber-Nation. Comment on the website at grizzly.libsyn.com. This program is sponsored by donations from people like you and is released with a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.